I never imagined my story would begin this way. I always thought of myself as the steady one in the family, Alara Vance, the practical daughter, the engineer who kept her head down and just worked hard. My parents, Arthur and Diana, were obsessed with appearances. Their lives revolved around perfect pictures, perfect events, perfect social circles. And in their perfect, polished world, my sister Serafina shined the brightest. She was the creative spirit, the daughter they always bragged about, the one they expected to succeed in spectacular, dramatic ways. I wasn't jealous, just used to being in the background. I thought that was my role. Until that night. My graduation dinner was supposed to be a celebration of years of effort, late nights, and sacrifices. Instead, it became the moment everything inside me broke. We were seated in an expensive restaurant, surrounded by velvet walls and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a palace. My parents had insisted on the place, not because they cared about my achievement, but because they wanted photos that screamed luxury. My grandmother, Genevieve Rutherford Grams, was there too. She was elegant, sharp, the kind of woman who commanded a room without raising her voice. Unlike my parents, she never cared about appearances. She cared about truth, and affection, and real pride. She stood up to make a toast, her eyes shining with emotion. I remember feeling warm inside, thinking she was about to say something sweet and simple. Instead, she said the sentence that ruined the night and changed my entire life. "I'm so proud of how you've handled the $2,750,000 I set aside for you," she declared, raising her glass with a proud smile. The air snapped. I felt my heart stumble in my chest. My fork slipped from my hand. My mind scrambled to make sense of her words, but nothing fit. "What, $2.75 million?" I asked, my voice barely coming out. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My parents froze like statues. My father's face turned a shade I had never seen before, shock mixed with guilt. My mother stared down at her plate, her fingers tight around her napkin. Serafina just gaped at me, wide-eyed and clueless. But Grams, her smile faltered instantly. She looked from me to my parents, and I watched anger and realization flicker through her eyes. She understood something in that moment. Something I hadn't discovered yet. Something awful. And as the truth began to take shape in my mind, I felt a deep, cold crack open inside my chest. Because whatever that money was, it was never given to me. And now the whole room knew it. The ride home feels like sitting inside a block of ice. No one speaks, and every second stretches longer than the one before it. As soon as we walk through the door, I can't hold it in anymore. I turn to my parents and ask the only question that's been burning in my mind. Why didn't I know about the money? My voice is steady, but inside, everything feels like it's shaking. Arthur and Diana avoid looking at me at first. When they finally speak, their words feel rehearsed, soft, and careful, like they're trying to keep control of the situation. They tell me I misunderstood what Grandma said. They insist things aren't as simple as they sounded. My dad claims the whole topic is complicated, and my mom adds that Grandma must have mixed something up because she's getting older. Their answers don't sit right with me. I know what I heard, and I know what it meant. I push back, refusing to let them twist the story. I ask again, sharper this time. The moment they realize I won't back down, something in their expressions shifts. The warm smiles disappear, replaced by tight, defensive looks. That's when the truth begins to slip out. My father lets out a long, tired sigh, and my mother finally stops pretending. They admit the trust existed. They admit Grandma gave them the money for me years ago. But instead of handing it over, they say they used it for important family needs. They list things quickly: school fees, house payments, difficult years, emergencies. They claim they were trying to keep us stable. They even say they didn't want me to feel overwhelmed by having so much money so young. Hearing them justify it so calmly feels like another hit to the chest. I stand there thinking about the nights I stayed up studying after long shifts, the loans stacked in my name, the stress I carried alone. While I struggled to pay for books, they were spending money that was meant for my future. And they think calling it family expenses makes it acceptable. I point out the truth. They didn't protect me, they used me. I remind them how many hours I worked, how many sacrifices I made, thinking we didn't have much. Saying it out loud makes something in both of them flicker. Guilt, fear, maybe both. So I ask the question I'm scared to hear the answer to. How much is left? The room goes completely still. My dad opens his mouth, but doesn't speak. My mom lowers her eyes. Neither of them can give me a number. Their silence tells me everything. They didn't save it. They didn't invest it. They spent nearly all of it. Not on me. Not for me. The weight of that truth settles heavily in the space between us. I feel the last bit of trust inside me snap. I always believed family could make mistakes, but this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice they made again and again. And standing there in my childhood home, I realized something I never expected to feel so clearly. The people who should have protected my future were the ones who stole it. The days after the truth comes out feel heavy and unreal. I move around like I'm watching my own life from far away. I stop checking my phone, ignore messages, and stay in my room with the curtains closed. Every thought circles back to the same painful point. My own parents chose to lie to me for years. I keep replaying their silence, their excuses, their empty faces. It becomes hard to eat or sleep. I just feel empty, as if something inside me has collapsed. One afternoon, I hear someone knocking over and over, refusing to leave. It's Maya, my closest friend, the only person who has ever seen me at my worst and not walked away. She pushes the door open before I can stop her and steps inside like she already knew what she would find. She doesn't hug me right away, and she doesn't start asking questions. She just looks at me, really looks, and sees how lost I am. When she speaks, her voice is steady and firm, not soft or pitying. She tells me that what happened wasn't just about money. She says they took away the stability I should have had. They used something meant to give me freedom and turned it into a secret burden. They didn't only take funds, she says. They took the years you spent trying to survive. Now you take something back. Hearing her say that wakes something in me. It isn't anger yet, but a small spark of strength I didn't know I still had. Maya insists I need answers from the one person who never lied to me, my grandmother. So the next morning, I gather enough courage to go see her. I feel nervous walking up to her door, unsure what she will think or say. But when she opens it, her expression goes from warm to sharp in a heartbeat. She ushers me inside, sits me down, and listens quietly as I explain everything my parents finally admitted. There is no confusion in her eyes. Only fury. Not the loud kind, but the kind that makes a room feel colder. She gets up, walks to her study, and returns with a folder that looks older than I am. Inside are the trust papers, stamped, signed, and clear. The instructions say the money was meant to be transferred to me when I turned 21. No conditions, no shared access, no loopholes. She places the documents in my hands and tells me they were created to give me a strong start in life. Her voice trembles with frustration as she says she never imagined my parents would take advantage of something meant to support me. Then she slides a card across the table with a name written in bold letters. Sterling Croft. She describes him as the kind of lawyer who doesn't lose, the kind who makes people regret crossing him. Before I leave, she holds my hand and says something that settles deep into my chest. Do not hesitate. They made their choice. Now you make yours. For the first time since that dinner, I feel steady. Not healed, not whole, but no longer drowning. Sterling Croft doesn't look like the kind of man who wastes time. The moment I step into his office, he studies me with sharp eyes, then gestures for me to sit. His voice is steady, almost cold, but it gives me a strange sense of security. I place the folder of trust documents on his desk, and he reads through them with the focus of someone who has seen every kind of betrayal. When he finally looks up, he simply nods and says, "We start today." There is no shock in his face, no surprise at what my parents did. Instead, he begins asking direct questions, dates, conversations, anything that might help him build a timeline. After gathering enough information, he brings in his team to begin a full financial review. I watch them open laptops, sift through statements, and start connecting numbers like pieces of a puzzle. Croft handles everything with a calm confidence, almost as if he already knows where the trail will lead. Within days, the results begin surfacing, and they hit harder than I expected. The money that was supposed to shape my future had been used in ways I never imagined. It didn't go toward real emergencies or keeping our family afloat. Instead, it funded years of luxury. My sister's expensive college program, fully paid. Her stylish apartment near campus, covered. There was even a record of a creative grant, something I had never heard of. But the documents show it was nothing more than an excuse to move more money into her name. Then it gets worse. My parents' car, a sleek BMW I once admired, was paid for with the trust. A lake house I visited only twice had also come from the same account. And tucked between those expenses were charges for vacations, hotel stays, and fine dining. Page after page, the truth becomes clearer. They treated the trust as their personal wallet, never once thinking I would find out. Seeing the numbers makes everything feel more real. This isn't just betrayal anymore. It's deliberate, planned, and repeated for years. Croft lays the papers neatly on the table and waits for me to finish looking through them. When I finally raise my eyes, he doesn't soften his tone. He explains that situations like this require a strong response. He begins outlining the steps, each one precise. First, we send a formal notice demanding repayment. It won't be a simple warning. It will be written in a way that forces my parents to face what they've done. If they refuse, we move to a civil lawsuit. He lists the charges calmly: theft, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Each one is heavy and each one fits. Then he goes a step further. Based on the documents, he says there may even be grounds for criminal charges. The word embezzlement hangs in the air, and for a moment, I feel both stunned and relieved. Someone finally sees what I see. Someone is willing to fight for me. Croft ends the meeting by telling me that once we begin, there is no turning back. I nod without hesitation. This time, I'm ready to move forward. Reaching out to Uncle Julian feels strange at first. Growing up, I only heard his name when my parents wanted to make a point about poor choices or irresponsible people. They always described him as someone who wasted opportunities and blamed others for his problems. I never questioned their version of him because I didn't know any better. But now, after seeing how easily they could twist the truth, I start wondering if their stories about him were just another way to hide something. When I call him, he sounds surprised but not unfriendly. I explain that I need to talk about something important involving my father. He tells me to come by, and his voice carries a calmness that makes me feel less nervous. When I arrive, he welcomes me in without hesitation. His home is simple and warm, not at all what I expected based on the stories I grew up hearing. Once we sit down, I tell him everything that has happened: the trust, the lies, the money that vanished without my knowledge. He listens without interrupting, but his expression darkens the longer I speak. When I finish, he lets out a slow breath and tells me something I didn't expect. He says he isn't shocked. In fact, he says my father has done something like this before. Julian explains that years ago, he and my father were supposed to inherit a small business from their uncle. It wasn't huge, but it was valuable enough to give them both a strong start in life. According to him, my father convinced him to sign a set of documents, claiming it was part of a routine process. Julian trusted him and didn't read the fine print. Later, he found out those papers transferred most of the ownership rights to Arthur. By the time he realized it, it was too late. Hearing this makes my stomach twist. It means what happened to me wasn't a rare, impulsive decision. It was part of a pattern. Julian doesn't speak with anger anymore. He sounds tired. But he still has proof. He goes to a drawer and returns with printed emails, old agreements, and financial records. They show exactly how my father maneuvered around him, using charm and pressure to take more than what was his. As I look through the papers, I see similarities in every tactic: keeping information hidden, using trust as a weapon, and benefiting from someone else's loss. The same behavior that hurt Julian years ago eventually reached me. Julian tells me that he stayed silent because he didn't want to create a family war. But now that he sees how far my father went, he refuses to let it continue. He offers his support without hesitation. He says he will speak to my lawyer, share everything he knows, and testify if needed. His involvement changes everything. His records provide a deeper history of manipulation, something that strengthens my case more than I expected. Leaving his house that day, I feel something shift inside me. I'm not alone in this fight anymore. And for the first time, I see my father clearly, not as the man I grew up trusting, but as someone who built his life on taking advantage of people who loved him. Elara knew her parents would push back, but she didn't expect the speed or the intensity. The moment her lawyer sent the first notice, a letter arrived from Arthur and Diana's attorney. It was cold and sharp, written to hurt more than to argue. They claimed she was only trying to destroy the family because she was jealous of Seraphina's success. They painted themselves as loving parents who had only ever helped her, and now she was punishing them. Reading it felt like a punch, not because any of it was true, but because it showed how far they were willing to go to protect themselves. Then came the text messages, one after another. Her mother wrote long paragraphs about gratitude and loyalty. Her father used shorter, harsher lines, telling her she was disappointing him again. Not once did either of them talk about the missing money. Not once did they show remorse. Everything was twisted into a story where Alara was the villain. Serafina joined in quickly. Her message was the longest. She accused Alara of attacking the family for money she didn't need. She acted like her Ivy League world was built on merit alone, pretending she hadn't benefited from everything Alara lost. She called Alara jealous and cold, claiming the lawsuit would ruin their parents. It was clear she cared more about the lifestyle she enjoyed than the truth behind it. There was no acknowledgement of right or wrong, only fear of losing comfort. Alara read every word, feeling something inside her shift. These were people she had defended for years, people she had once believed loved her unconditionally. But now, with every accusation they threw at her, the mask slipped a little more. She saw the pattern clearly. Love was given only when she was useful. The moment she stood up for herself, they turned cruel. Instead of breaking her, their reaction clarified everything. She didn't feel confusion anymore, only clarity. She had not imagined the manipulation. She had not exaggerated the betrayal. Their own words confirmed the truth. She forwarded every message to Sterling Croft. He read them without emotion, only nodding. "This helps us," he said simply. And he was right. Their threats, their refusal to discuss the financial theft, their emotional attacks, each part supported her case. It showed intent, not misunderstanding. Alara realized she was done begging for respect that never existed. Their threats to cut her off forever no longer scared her. In a strange way, she felt lighter. The family she thought she was losing had never truly been hers. What she was walking away from was a cage she hadn't recognized before. She didn't reply to any of their messages. Not to defend herself, not to argue, not even to express hurt. She chose silence. And for the first time in her life, silence felt like power. They wanted her to back down. Instead, they pushed her forward. And she wasn't turning back now. Alara knew fighting her parents directly would only push them to twist the story further. So she listened carefully when Croft explained the next step. He told her there was a way to shift the pressure without exposing herself. Release only the facts, and let the truth speak louder than their accusations. It wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. For years, they had held every advantage. Now, Alara was taking some power back. She gathered the documents Croft had organized, bank transfers, invoices, tuition receipts, the fake grant, and the payments for the cars and lake house. She removed anything that revealed her identity. She wasn't trying to embarrass herself. She wanted the focus on their actions, not her pain. Croft connected her with a trusted business journalist, known for exposing financial misconduct. She sent everything anonymously, then stepped back. For a week, nothing happened. Alara almost forgot about the leak while dealing with legal paperwork. Then one morning, her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in from coworkers, acquaintances, and people she barely knew. The article had been published. It didn't mention names, but everyone in her parents' circle recognized the clues. The industry, the timeline, the financial details that mirrored Arthur and Diana's lifestyle. The journalist had written it like a puzzle, one the community could easily solve. It described parents who had drained their child's trust fund to pay for a sibling's elite education and their own luxuries. It explained how the child recently discovered the truth and hired a lawyer. The tone was calm, factual, and devastating. Within hours, the news spread through the city's business networks. Arthur's clients began asking questions. Some quietly paused their contracts. Others sent polite but firm messages saying they needed to reconsider their partnership. His company's reputation had always relied on trust. Now, people whispered that if he could take from his own child, what might he do to them? Diana faced fallout almost immediately. The charities she served wanted to avoid any association with scandal. Some sent formal notices removing her from committees. Others simply stopped inviting her. The social invitations, brunches, and events that once filled her weeks disappeared. Friends who used to praise her now avoided eye contact in public. Alara watched all this from a distance. She didn't celebrate. She didn't feel joy in their downfall. It was strange. She expected to feel triumphant, but instead she felt calm. Everything unfolding was the natural result of their choices. They had built a life on image and influence. When that image cracked, the consequences arrived quickly. What mattered most to her was that, for the first time, the world wasn't blindly believing them. People were finally seeing what she had lived with for years. She didn't want destruction, she wanted truth. And now truth was moving through their world like a quiet storm. She stayed silent, letting the article do its work. Her parents always controlled the narrative. But this time, the The story wasn't theirs to spin. It was simply the truth, and it was finally out. Arthur and Diana asked for mediation as a last attempt to control the situation. Alara agreed only because Croft said it would show the court she was willing to resolve things the proper way. When she walked into the room, she saw immediately how much her parents had changed. The confident, polished couple who once spoke with rehearsed charm now looked pale and exhausted. Their fall from grace had shaken them. The moment the session began, they tried to take over the conversation. Arthur leaned forward, acting wounded, saying Alara had misunderstood their intentions. Diana used tears like a shield, insisting they loved her and never meant to hurt her. They talked about stress, sacrifices, and how family should not fight over money. Everything they said was crafted to make them look like victims instead of the people who made the choices that brought them here. Their lawyer slid a paper across the table. It was an offer, a small amount of money that barely covered a fraction of what they had taken. In return, they wanted her silence, no lawsuit, and no further embarrassment. They called it a fair compromise. To them, it was just another negotiation where they expected her to fold the way she always had when she was younger. Alara listened without reacting. For the first time, she felt nothing toward their performance. Their tears did not sting her. Their excuses did not confuse her. She realized they weren't apologizing, they were panicking. They were afraid of losing their status, their business, and their influence. Their fear had nothing to do with love for her. Croft stayed calm beside her, quietly taking notes. Genevieve sat behind them, silent but steady, offering a presence that gave Alara strength. When her parents finished their speech, the room waited for her response. Alara finally spoke, her voice steady and clear. She told them she wasn't interested in emotional games or shallow apologies. She laid out the facts. They had drained a trust that was legally hers, lied about it for years, and benefited from money meant to secure her future. They had used those funds for luxury and comfort while she struggled through college believing they couldn't help her. Then she presented her terms. She didn't want a small settlement. She wanted full restitution, every dollar taken plus interest. The amount would require them to sell assets. The lake house, the BMW, the luxury investments, maybe even Serafina's apartment. This wasn't revenge. It was simply returning what was rightfully hers. She told them they had 48 hours to agree. If they refused, Croft would file the lawsuit, pursue civil penalties, and push for criminal charges if necessary. She was done protecting them from consequences. Arthur tried to protest. Diana tried to guilt her. But Alara didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't soften. For the first time in her life, the power in the room belonged entirely to her. And they felt it. They didn't leave that room as parents comforting a daughter. They left as people realizing their control over her was gone forever. The moment came faster than I expected. My parents refused to meet my terms, thinking they could outlast me, or that I would back down. They didn't. Within days, Croft filed the lawsuit. The courtroom felt tense, every eye on the pile of evidence we presented. Documents, bank records, and emails were laid out clearly. Each page told the story my parents had tried to hide for years. There was no wiggle room, no loopholes. The truth was undeniable. The trial was swift, almost surgical in its precision. Croft presented every detail with calm efficiency. He highlighted the transfers, the fake grants, the luxury purchases, and how each one directly came from funds intended for me. He showed how my sister benefited at every step, and how my parents had repeatedly lied and manipulated me. Witnesses, including Uncle Julian, confirmed the long history of their behavior. I sat quietly through it all, letting the evidence speak for me, feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering anger. When the judge finally spoke, it felt like the room held its breath. The ruling was total. Every asset my parents owned, houses, cars, luxury items, was ordered to be sold to repay the money they had taken. The judge also referred the case to the authorities for criminal investigation, leaving no doubt that their actions carried serious consequences. My parents' carefully constructed world began to crumble in that moment. The aftermath hit hard and fast. Arthur's business, once considered solid and untouchable, started to collapse. Clients withdrew contracts, investors lost confidence, and employees began leaving. His reputation, built over decades, could not survive the exposure. Diana, humiliated and stripped of financial and social power, filed for divorce. Her attempts to maintain control over the situation failed completely. The divorce process was messy, public, and symbolic of the total breakdown of the life they had built together. Serafina, who had lived comfortably on the money that wasn't hers, was forced to face reality. Without funding, she had no choice but to find work. She struggled at first, realizing that her privileges had insulated her from the responsibilities she now faced. The life she had taken for granted evaporated almost overnight. And the family itself, the unit I once believed was unbreakable, was gone. The lies, the betrayal, and the theft had destroyed every bond that had seemed permanent. There were no reconciliations, no quiet apologies, only the stark reality that trust could not survive when it had been violated so completely. Through it all, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and clarity. Sorrow for the family I lost, for the illusions I had held, and for the years of deceit that shaped my youth. But clarity too. I now understood the full extent of their choices and the consequences that followed. The destruction wasn't cruel. It was simply the natural result of actions built on lies. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from manipulation, free from dependence, and free to reclaim my life exactly as I chose, without anyone controlling or stealing my future. The day the wire transfer finally arrived, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a quiet sadness. Money alone couldn't erase the years of betrayal, the lies, or the trust one had lost. Yet holding the balance in my account, knowing it was fully mine, brought a sense of control I had never known before. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming what had always belonged to me. The first thing I did was clear my debts. Student loans had weighed on me for years, a constant reminder that I had worked hard while others took what was meant for me. Paying them off felt like shedding chains I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Then I focused on my future. I found a modest home that felt like a sanctuary rather than a showpiece. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. Every room, every corner, reflected my choices and my independence. I finally felt a sense of peace in creating a space that belonged only to me. But I couldn't stop there. I had always dreamed of launching my own engineering company, and now I had the resources to make it happen. Phoenix Tech became my focus. I poured time, energy, and capital into designing a business built on innovation, honesty, and impact. Unlike my family, I wanted to create value for others rather than take it from them. Watching the company grow from an idea into a functioning, promising startup gave me a satisfaction that no inherited money or family approval could have ever matched. Beyond personal success, I wanted to honor the one family member who had truly supported me, my grandmother, Genevieve. She had believed in fairness, in justice, and in me, even when everyone else had failed. I set up a scholarship in her name for first-generation engineering students, young people who, like me, had talent and determination but lacked financial support. Seeing the first recipients accepted and thriving reminded me that money could be used to build something lasting and meaningful, not just maintain comfort or privilege. Sitting in my home one evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized something profound. My parents had thought taking the trust would give them power over me. They believed they could dictate my life, my future, and even my sense of self. What they didn't realize was that true strength doesn't come from taking. It comes from creating, from building, and from standing firm in your own truth. The $2.75 million they tried to steal was gone, but in taking it, they had forced me to discover my own resilience, resourcefulness, and independence. I learned that no one, especially those closest to you, can define your value unless you allow them to. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, loss into ambition, and injustice into motivation. In the end, I gained something far more powerful than money: the confidence to shape my life entirely on my own terms and never let anyone take that away again. Do you think I handled it right by fighting for what was mine, or should I have trusted my family again? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. For more stories like this, subscribe and hit the bell.